on Straight Talk Africa, it's International Women's Day, a global event celebrating the social, economic, cultural, and political accomplishments of women. This year's theme is Be Bold for Change. The day is also a call to action for gender parity and social, economic justice for all. That's coming up next right here on Straight Talk Africa. Hello, welcome to Straight Talk Africa, live from the Voice of America studios here in Washington. I am Shaka Sali.
And hello to all our viewers and listeners on the continent and elsewhere. I'm Ayan Bior, your social media reporter.
Today, we have a conversation on the significance of the International Women's Day.
And coming up later, we asked you to share your thoughts on women's accomplishments in the last year. Your emails and Facebook and Twitter comments poured in, and we'll reveal some of them ahead on Straight Talk Africa.
As we celebrate Women's Day today, we also analyze why the event is still so important and relevant. My colleague Paul Cisco has more on the story.
You'll be told that a woman's gaze must never stretch as far as a man's.
This clip is from London-based Somali poet Farah Gabden. On this International Women's Day, her work is inspiring women from all walks of life to be bold and not to be afraid. She is quoted as having said, "I've spent so much time trying to be invisible, not to stand out. I was afraid of everything and everyone. I wrote secretly for years, stories, poetry, but I never felt good enough. Confidence is not something everyone is born with. Fearlessness is not the absence of fear, but pushing through it," she wrote, over and over again. "Sometimes you have to force yourself to keep standing, even when your knees threaten to give in." International Women's Day is being observed around the world on March 8th. This year's theme, indeed, Be Bold for Change. The contributions of women to the cultural, political, and socio-economic well-being of societies around the world is beyond measure, despite immense traditional, cultural, societal, and political barriers. On the African continent and worldwide, women continue to struggle to achieve their rights to gender parity. Currently, there is a record number of leaders that are women, presidents, prime ministers, and other heads of state. Among them, German Chancellor Angela Merkel and Liberian President Ellen Johnson Sirleaf. Former leaders of note, Argentina's Isabel Perón, the Iron Lady, Britain's Margaret Thatcher, India's Indira Gandhi, Golda Meir, Israeli Prime Minister, President Corazon Aquino of the Philippines, and Prime Minister Benazir Bhutto of Pakistan. But the United States, in more than 220 years, has never elected a female president. In November 2005, Ellen Johnson Sirleaf became the first democratically elected female head of state in Africa. In January 2018, at the end of her second term, presidential power in Liberia is expected to be passed on to another leader. By January 2018, there may be only a single African woman head of state, Amina Gurab, the current president of Mauritius. An increasing number of women are becoming politically engaged across Africa, and they face great difficulties winning public office and, once elected, maintaining their posts. The political culture in Africa is still largely dominated by entrenched loyalties and deep financial and social networks, from which women are junior members at best. The African Union, despite being recently chaired by South Africa's Dlamini Zuma, remains what many complain of as the old boys club.
The night you are born, I will take you to see the moon.
As the world celebrates International Women's Day, we might consider just why Africa is so often referred to as Mother Africa and our world as Mother Earth. Paul Cisco, VOA News, Washington.
Thanks, Paul, for that report. Joining us here in our Washington studio are two distinguished guests. Ambassador Liberata Mulamula, visiting scholar Institute of African Studies at George Washington University. She also served as the Tanzanian Principal Secretary, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and as her country's ambassador to the United States. And K. River Levinson, President and CEO, KRL International, LLC, and author of Choosing the Hero, My Improbable Journey and the rise of Africa's first woman president. Well, ladies, I have to say frankly that, first of all, I am profoundly honored and exceedingly humbled to have the opportunity to host you on Straight Talk Africa on this most important day of Women's Day, of course.
Yeah.
You all right?
Yes.
How do you feel?
It's a privilege to be here. It's a privilege to be here. Looking forward to the show.
It's a pleasure, of course, having the two of you here. Later in the program, we'll give you, the audience, a chance to call and talk with our guests. The number to call is 202-619-3111. The US country code is 1. Let me come to you immediately, Madam Ambassador. What does this day really mean to you?
Yeah, Shaka, first of all, thank you for the opportunity.
You're most welcome.
But in fact, it's where you started. This day is important. It makes us feel important. And it makes us feel recognized. But more important is that the world attention is now focused on a woman. I was so thrilled when I woke up and I switched on my phone, and then I had so many messages trickling in, coming in, one after the other, and all celebrating the Women's Day. But what fascinated me most, the majority were men, and especially those conservative men of Africa.
Very interesting.
And coming out, of course, they had also trying to play it down, but then I was so happy. And as I said, it made me feel special. And also being in your studio emphasizes the importance of the women on this day.
Very interesting, but you have been really special in many, many different ways. You've been, of course, you are a mother. You've been a career diplomat. In fact, pretty much reached your, perhaps, diplomatic pinnacle, really. And you are currently a visiting scholar.
Indeed, indeed. Yeah, I mean, of course, I wouldn't call myself special, but I must say I was very privileged, very, I mean, among the many women colleagues. I must say that I had a very bountiful career. I started from the rank and file because people always ask me, says, what does it take to be an ambassador? I say, you know what? It took me 25 years to be appointed ambassador. I started as a very junior officer, but I was able to rise.
Like a third secretary or something like that?
Yes, third secretary.
After graduating from
the University of Dar es Salaam. And if, of course, when I say when, I'll be giving away my age.
Don't
but
worry,
it has been so many years after college to be where I am. But I must also thank the leadership of Tanzania. Because it is our founding president ensured that this was locked in. The gender equality was locked in the Constitution. But also for him, in his actions, I wouldn't be here if it were not for Mwalimu.
So for the audience who may not
Mwalimu Julius
understand
Nyerere, the first president of Tanzania, he made us to be what we are. I come from a very humble family, humble beginning. I wouldn't have reached where I am if it was not for the late Mwalimu Julius Nyerere, our founding father, who ensured that all of us, we go to school. We had the universal primary system.
Correct.
People called Tanzania many names, communists, socialists, whatever. But then this is a product.
It worked for you.
It worked for me and many other women. I was also happy that after Mwalimu left and also passed on, all the presidents that came in, they continued and even made it better for us. So for me, I must say I was one of the few that were able to rise up to the ambassadorial level, and I've been in very key posts. I started in New York, and then was posted to Canada, and then from Canada I went back to New York, especially after the 9/11 when things were tough. I was transferred from Canada to New York to be able to see when President Bush declared that you are either with us or without us. So they wanted to have seasoned diplomats on the table.
Very interesting.
So since then, I've been moving until when I was appointed to be, in fact, what I treasure most was when I was given a very difficult responsibility to start up an organization in the Great Lakes region. In the middle of the war, the turmoil, the rebellion, I was sent to Bujumbura, Burundi, and to be able to put up a structure that would ensure there is peace and stability in that region. That one, as a woman, I think that overstretched
really?
my capability, but then the confidence and the hard work enabled me to do what I was supposed to do by the heads of state, because it was not only Tanzania that put me in that post, it was 11 countries of the Great Lakes that put me there. So that one, I think, was also a launching pad for more bigger things.
Okay, okay.
Yeah, so I must say, when I was sent here, Washington, I was the second woman in Tanzania to be appointed an ambassador, especially the career ambassador. I was maybe, as a career ambassador, I was the career officer, I was the first one. And this was after 50 years of our relations with the US. So I can't say it has been all sunshine, but I've been given that opportunity. The trust that our leaders, my leaders had in me helped me propel. But more important, my family. And you mentioned about being a mother, a career officer. The balancing act, Shaka. Sometimes it costs you in one responsibility, but I tried my best, and because I had a very supportive husband. So that helped me to balance at least the motherhood, the being a wife, and also be able to excel in my career. So I came out somebody like a celebrity, because we started, we were many, but not many of the women reached where I have reached. And I've now retired in dignity and honor. But also I'm so happy that there is life after retirement. Interesting. Now being a scholar at the Institute of African Studies at the George Washington University, another pioneer, because for all these years, there have never been any Institute on African Studies. It's just been launched in September. I just came to be part of this very interesting time at the George Washington University. Very interesting. So that we can be able to tell our story, so that people can hear our narrative from the practitioners. So I take this to be a very life-changing experience, but worth it.
Who inspired you along the way?
Along the way, let me say, where I started, that I think my foundation started with our first president. But my father recognized the potential that we had. But I was so happy that the leaders from our first president until now, and the president we have, this is about, this is a 50th phase government, they saw the potential. And then for them, especially the former president, Kikwete, he was, I think during his time, and I hope the new president will continue, he was able to recognize, not giving us a favor, but recognizing the potential, the capability, and that he trusted, he had a lot of trust in women, delivering, and we never let him down. Well,
we'll come to more of that later. Now we'll pause for a short break, and we want to remind you that Straight Talk Africa is now streaming on Facebook. Just enter the keyword Straight Talk Africa and watch our show live. And don't forget to share it with your friends. Also, we are on Twitter. We are tweeting live. Follow us at VOA Shaka. That's VOA Shaka. And join in on today's discussion with your questions and comments. Don't forget to use the hashtag VOA Women's Day. We'll put some of your tweets on air later in the show. And we'll be right back. So please, don't go away.
We are able to touch on things that are important to people on an everyday basis. We hope that our viewers are getting inspired when they watch our show. They're getting a view of the world from a different perspective, things that perhaps are not in their immediate vicinity. Today, I could put in on the show something that is a little different, a little unique, and this gives me that, inspiration to come to work.
This is Straight Talk Africa on the Voice of America. What is your opinion about today's topic? Call us at 202-619-3111. U.S. country code 1. When you call, remember the following. Ask only one question. Keep your comment brief and turn down the volume on your radio or television. Now let's return to Straight Talk Africa.
Very much, Esther Gidi-Ewart, and of course, welcome back to Straight Talk Africa, which is coming to you live from Washington. Let me come to you immediately, River. It's not that I really forgot you. What does this particular day particularly mean to you?
So I heard the ambassador, it's a day of celebration. For me, being in Washington right now, it feels like a day of resistance. Mm-hmm. And for me, working with Paul Sisko said Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, who's the first democratically elected woman to lead an African nation. And again, as Paul said, when she leaves in January of next year, likely we'll just have the president of Mauritius as a woman. I think for me, it's an opportunity for reflection and to figure out why is that? Mm-hmm. 12 years later, we had Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, and I know there can't be more than one Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, but why 12 years later, the barrier to entry for women political leadership has still not been broken? So that's, I think, the point I wanted to put on the table.
It's very interesting that you make comparisons between Ellen Johnson Sirleaf and Amina Gulib Fakim, the president of Mauritius, mm-hmm. who also, by the way, is a professor and a doctor. We forget, of course, that when it comes to Mauritius, we're talking about a parliamentary sort of system, mm-hmm. in which case, frankly, the key there is, in fact, the prime minister, mm-hmm. executive prime
Good
minister,
point.
but not necessarily the president, who happens to be, of course, head of state and commander-in-chief of the armed forces.
So you're making my point even sharper.
Mm-hmm.
I hadn't realized that the prime minister has the real authority, but then it just goes back to the point, again, in your narration, that we have to analyze why the barrier to political entry is so high at that level in the 54 countries on the continent.
I know that you are very, very close to the Liberian president. Mm-hmm. You also played a very, very crucial role, really, in fact, having her elected the first democratically elected female president mm-hmm. in Africa. Is she an aberration? What makes her tick?
Do you know,
really?
she's not an aberration, but she's a unique person mm-hmm. at a unique time in history in Liberia. I mean, she's a fierce fighter. She had an international network coming into a country, and then you have Liberia, basically a failed state, failed by the men leaders, and there was the space for her to compete. It was a tough competition, but she was able to compete. So I think she was a unique person in a unique time in history, but she's not an aberration. You know, what she is a success story that we have to understand, and then also look why we're not able to replicate that in other places. And I think Paul said some really important things, because the institutions and the parties and the money and the financing, it's still, Ambassador, as you know, it's controlled by men on the continent. So that's a big issue. The other big issue is that the women, they have children, and their first priority, other than their own health, is their children. And until there's a way to have that type of network where the children are cared for and they can aspire higher, that's a challenge too. So I think we all have to go back to that resolution that was passed in 2011 at the UN, where it talked about all the obstacles for women and it identified them. And I went back and I looked at that as my homework for the show. And it's 2017, and I'm like, well, what's the measurement? And I'm not so sure.
We talk about Africa, but what about looking at, essentially looking at the issue really globally? For example, we are living in one of the most advanced democratic societies on this planet Earth. And yet, the last time I checked, River, there has never been a female president at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue in Washington, D.C.
I think we're
Since
all
1776.
aware of that fact. I think we're all very aware of that fact.
Why?
I mean, I think it's just there are institutional barriers to entry here, but I think Hillary Clinton had a shot. You know, she had a real shot. She had everything behind her.
Correct.
For the presidency. She had her husband. She had the party. I mean, the party to a fault, because the party actually pulled closer to her at the cost of alienating Bernie Sanders. So she had everything.
She had deep pockets.
She had deep pockets, and she had the ability to give confidence that she could serve. And so I think what we should recognize and celebrate is she was the first woman to ever take head of a major political party. That was a first in the country's history as the head of the Democratic Party. But then I guess there's a whole debate, Ambassador, you can weigh in, is whether her being a woman was the final barrier to entry of her being president, or if it was personal to Hillary and to her history and to the mood in the country that elected Donald Trump. And I don't think any of us are prepared to to analyze that, but you know, she had a shot. She did make history. Nobody can take that away from her. But maybe she, unlike Ellen, was not the right person at the right time in our own political history.
I hear you. What about Madam Ambassador? Obviously, in the last so many years during your diplomatic career, you have interacted with a lot of people. Both men and women. What were some of the most important challenges, frankly, that you encountered along the way, and how were you able to overcome them?
Yeah, of course, as she said, you know, we always confronted with that glass ceiling. However higher you go, you still have to hit it. You bounce back. So this is what we face, but specifically for, at least in the African context, it's this male chauvinism is so deeply entrenched.
What exactly do you mean by that?
Yes, because
to an ordinary person listening to you or watching you.
Yeah, because the way we were brought up traditionally, the women,
yes,
they had their place.
Yes.
It's in the kitchen, it's to look after the husbands. In fact, if my grandmother was alive, she wouldn't be happy to see me in this role.
Why?
Because as girls, we were not supposed even to speak in public. Shouting was like, it's not a value. You are not.
You're not a vacuum.
Yes, I mean, it was immoral, sort of. So our place was, no, this is where you belong. So even the men grew up having that in their mindset, that we are there for them. And for a woman to come out in the forehand, it's like, who do you think you are? It's like you lose respect. So that garbage.
Does that come from men particularly, or does it in fact come from both men and women?
No. Mostly it was women, because, for example, we are all dependent on men to go to school. How dependent on my father to take me to school. But then if my father didn't see the value of education, I would not have seen a classroom. Because my mother could not have afforded to take me to school. We were all dependent on our father as a head of the family. So it all starts from there. So if you are denied the opportunity to go to school, then it means you are denied opportunities in your life. So that is one aspect. But two, there is this is, again, I use the phrase of stereotypes.
Stereotype?
You are defined, there's a certain template for what a woman should be. So if you say you want to go for politics, the way you are treated, it's not like shaka.
And you have encountered all that personally?
As personally, yes. Because I remember, let me just make you laugh, because I remember one of the bosses told me once, he says, Liberata, what's your problem with you? Why can't you walk like a woman for once?
Really?
Yes.
What exactly did he mean? How were you walking?
Because for me, determination, and then, of course, you know, in our culture, you are supposed to be a very feminist, like you, the way you behave, the way you walk. For me, unfortunately, I walk so fast. And you say, you know, this doesn't make you look like a woman.
Interesting.
Sorry, but try for once, it is to just behave like a woman. So I said, but that is an insult to me. He said, no, because there's only who can tell you. Others, maybe you think you are just too much.
Interesting.
You are just too much. Slow down.
So,
but with my nature.
Would you agree, for example, with some people who actually say that perhaps there is in fact a need for fundamental changes in both men and women's attitudes, mindsets, really about this issue?
Yeah, it needs both. I agree with you. It needs change of both the women, not to feel like, oh yeah, that's why that's what I should be. So you have to change that. But also women, in trying to prove themselves, trying to be like men.
Yes.
They have spoiled the whole soup. Most of them have just overdone it. They neglect, of course, their families. They try to be, not because biologically there are certain qualities that women we have to restore and convey. But then some of the women, I must say, they just been too, I don't know, activists. Too much of activists. So that has to change.
But there is a school of thought, in fact, Liberata, which says that you women, in fact, are part of the problem. You, as mothers, for example, you have incredible power to nurture life. You basically raise children, really, whether they are girls who become women or whether they are boys who become men. That, at least at that level, maybe the first 7 years, really, you could, in fact, bring about some kind of revolutionary changes where a boy and a girl simply looks at, they look at themselves, frankly, as essentially human beings.
No, however you put it, I remember the late, of course, the first Prime Minister of Israel, Golda Meir. Golda Meir, she said, you know, I find this talk about gender equality and what as foolishness. That's how she put it. And he said, who is discriminating, who is being discriminated? He said, if at all anybody has been discriminated, are men. And you know why? What he said? Because they were denied to have children.
Very interesting.
You see, so that's what I'm saying. If we have a win-win situation, that's where we start.
That's very interesting because, in fact, we're talking about gourmet. I believe that I read somewhere when she was a member of the cabinet of Ben Gurion, she used to be referred to as the only man in the cabinet. Can you believe that?
Okay. Yeah, that's how.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because she was extremely effective at whatever she did.
Very effective. So this, I think, the issue is being effective. And one of the singer, Yvonne Shaka Shaka, she was defining the word women. She said women means well-organized men.
Very interesting. Shaka Shaka, of course, of South Africa. Well,
Yes, of
time
South
is not
Africa.
our best ally. We'll come back to that and more later. You're tuned into Straight Talk Africa. We'll have more of a discussion in a moment, including our social media segment. So please, don't go away.
Like Voice of America on Facebook. Follow VOA on Twitter. Join VOA on our YouTube channel. Like, follow, join VOA.
This is Straight Talk Africa on the Voice of America. Call us now with your questions and comments. The number is 202-619-3111 and the U.S. country code is 1. Call us direct and we'll call you right back. Remember to turn down the volume on your radio or television and keep your comments brief. Now back to Straight Talk Africa.
Welcome back to Straight Talk Africa, live from Washington. It's time to bring in my colleague and social media reporter, Ayen Bior. Take it away, Ayen.
Well, thanks, Shaka. International Women's Day is today, March 8th. It's also known as the United Nations Day for Women's Rights and International Peace, which celebrates the achievements of women throughout history. But the majority of our commentators across our platforms so far are men. Ladies, you are an important part of the conversation. Your thoughts and ideas matter to us, and we want to hear from you. So send us a tweet at VOA Shaka or go to Facebook and tell us where you're watching from and share your ideas and frustrations with us. Keep in mind that our question of the week asks, what accomplishments would you like to see women attain in 2017? Well, before we begin, I'd like to thank all of you for using our social media platforms to communicate with us, and a reminder that we are tweeting live today. Use the hashtag VOA Women's Day. And if you haven't yet, please follow us at VOA Shaka. And speaking of it, let's go to a tweet from Emmanuel Cachele, who tweets, women never fail the common people because they're caring mothers. Let's give them a chance. And we have another tweet from Esemwede, who tweets, more women participated in government and more women empowerment to enable sustainable development. And now to our comment of the week from Facebook fan Fiona Jaloza in Malawi, who writes, women play a great role in as far as mankind is concerned. Let's support one another, fight for one another and our children, despite the challenges that we face. Let us hold our hands together to feed our children and educate them so that they can become the best citizens we ever imagined. Let us stand and say no to wars, no to poverty, no to rape, no to abductions, no to child abuse, no to human trafficking, no to violence against women and children, and no to all evil. Together, we can make it, but it begins with you. Thank you, Fiona, for your comment. Now, let's go to another comment from Facebook fan Muhindo Wilson in Uganda, who writes, young girls drop out of school because they can't afford sanitary pads. One woman activist, Dr. Stella Nyanzi, a senior researcher at Makerere University, was interrogated Tuesday at the CID offices and later released in Kampala for speaking out against the Ugandan government for failure to provide sanitary pads. Women's Day will be boycotted in Uganda. Let's go to another Facebook comment from Manny Alkedo Kasi from Tanzania, who writes, I would like to see more women hold diverse government positions around the world, especially in Africa. We also have women presidents from whom we have learned that women are true leaders. History has proved that women never fail the common people. In 2017, women should take a chance. We men have done our part, and things are still getting worse in the world. Well, our last Facebook comment comes from Moses Ishaya Lochang in Nigeria, who writes, most African countries need leadership change, and women should fill in the gap, as the men have failed. South Sudanese women should be more ambitious. African culture should not stop women from achieving success in their field or endeavor. Well, thank you, everyone, for sharing your thoughts with us. A reminder that we appreciate all the feedback, whether it's in social media form or using other means to communicate with us. Please keep them coming. And if you're a new fan, drop us a line at africatv@voanews.com. Once again, our email address is africatv@voanews.com. Or post your comment on our Facebook page. Enter the keywords Straight Talk Africa. Interact with our show as it's streaming live on Facebook. Be sure to visit us online at voaafrica.com, or you can join our YouTube channel. Sign up to VOA TV2 Africa, and be sure to follow us on Twitter at VOA Shaka. A reminder that the show is streaming live every Wednesday. Go to VOA Straight Talk Africa TV program page on our website, or simply watch us live on your mobile device. Just download the VOA mobile app. Now let's take a look at what's on tap for next week's program. On the next Straight Talk Africa, we look at Ghana, 60 years after becoming the first Black African country to gain independence. The 1957 precedent inspired other nations to seek their sovereignty, and 17 African countries gained independence in 1960. That's right here on the next Straight Talk Africa. Well, that's all for today's social media segment. Shaka, you and the guest have a lot of social media comments to discuss. Back to you.
Indeed. Welcome back to a conversation, of course, on the significance of the International Women's Day. Our distinguished guests are Ambassador Liberata Mulamula and K. River Levinson. Well, you had it all. Your reaction, River?
I guess my first reaction is that those are really powerful statements by your social media followers, really articulate, and I think they reflect what Paul Sisko said in the introduction and what Madam Ambassador has spoken about the need for women to step up, to surpass their fears, like the Somali poet said earlier, and to step into the political arena, because I agree with a lot of the comments that the social media followers said that men, not all men, have failed their people in Africa, but a certain type of man holding on to power, not willing to relinquish, and winner-take-all mentality, that has failed Africa. And women have not been part of that history. They come with fresh ideas. They come with more flexibility. So one of the things that I'm going to look at that I'd like to discuss is what are those barriers to political entry, and what do people like me who are advocates on the outside who have worked with President Sirleaf and also Dr. Joyce Banda, who was on your show earlier, what can people like us do? I also believe that the chauvinism and the cultural barriers are pretty deep, but also I believe that one of the greatest things that we can do as friends of Africa and Africans do for themselves is empower through education, because an educated woman, a woman who is able to read, many women of certain generation are not, an empowered girl will make more deliberate choices, not just about herself, but about her commitment to community and country.
What about some who might also say that perhaps there is also need for some sort of affirmative action, really?
Do you know, I knew you were going to ask that question. And, it's come up a lot. Even in Liberia, people are thinking about putting quotas. We have to have this many women in the legislature or in the parliament. I think that's a philosophical and personal decision. I don't know where the ambassador comes. I'm not a fan. I'm not a fan of saying that we have to have these type of women because it's supposed to be competency that puts you in a leadership position. I am a big fan of recognizing the inherent weaknesses in a system and looking at greater support for maternal and child health and for education of the girl child, as well as looking at empowerment through economics, because women have not traditionally been the holder of the bank account or now the app on your phone that holds your money. So that's a personal opinion. I don't know what the ambassador thinks about affirmative action. Ambassador.
Yeah, in fact, there are always diverse views on the affirmative action. We call it quotas in our countries. But to be honest, if we didn't have that system, we would not have had the number that we are celebrating about being in parliament, because there was no way, again, going to the breaking the glass ceiling. This quota system at least was an entry point.
Okay.
For, again, those society, male-dominated society. So when they introduced that quota system, it was meant to see, this could be a launching pad for those women, not to make it to be in that comfort zone, but at least once they put their feet in parliament and see what it is, then we expected them now to go and vie for the seats, parliamentary seats in the constituencies. And this is, I think, also in Tanzania, we're trying to do away with the quotas. I mean, those who have been there they give them a specific period of time. If you have been there for one term, then the second term, then you say, no. You have either to go to the constituency or drop out. So that, of course, inspires those who are already there, but those who are also coming in, at least they will be given the opportunity. And it's not even given, because I see there is very aggressive campaign, because these are along the political parties' structures, to get nominated. It's always a big competition. It's not that it's handpicked. No, they have really to campaign to be able to show what do they bring, what value do they bring. And of course, again, unfortunately, it also required money, a lot of resources to reach out and be able to be elected or nominated parliament. So for me, I say, in our situation, we wouldn't be where we are if we didn't have this so-called affirmative action. I know for the countries like the United States, with so many years of being a democratic country, maybe you don't need it. We also, in Africa, we have countries that have emerged from conflict, like in Liberia. I mean, how do you organize these women? So the best thing was to give them some seats so that they get in parliament, their voices are heard, but then don't be too comfortable. So for me, actually, I find sometimes it's an academic debate, but the reality on the ground that we cannot do with this. But my argument is that we don't have to make it a permanent phenomenon, but in this transition, we need this.
What about the model of Rwanda?
Yeah, of course, Rwanda, the history of Rwanda is like a country that has emerged from ashes to be where it is. And thanks, of course, also with the strong leadership that has been exhibited by the President Kagame. One area where they have done well is this women empowerment. The Rwanda system might not be like fitting in the conventional political system where there's this multi-competition parties and so forth. But then the women, again, it is surprising that most of the women who were in conflict situations are the ones who have made it. Even top of President Nsari, I mean, I don't know why, or maybe because they were peace activists that gave them their confidence. So in Rwanda, when the doors were opened, the women pushed their way in. So now they are leading worldwide with 60% of the parliamentary seats in the world, even outstripping the Nordic countries. And it is a very unique, it's a very unique system, unique success, given the history and what they made from genocide and having these women there. May I salute them?
But is it, there are some critics, of course, who say that it's not really a reflection of competency or merit for that matter, but that perhaps, in fact, the important reason that arrangement is in place is because of loyalty and questionable loyalty to the appointing authority?
Because I have interacted with the Rwandese women. I know them. These are very strong in their own merit. Of course, once you get there, I mean, we are always loyal to the government in power. But what I've seen for situation in Rwanda reminds me of what our former president Benjamin Mkapa saying, you cannot bring Coca-Cola democracy. It doesn't work in our countries.
What did he mean by that?
I mean, that is exporting democracy. I mean, having a defined borders of what is democracy, and therefore that's what we should also reach. But it has to be adapted to our own situations and conditions.
I see.
Yeah.
Well, I understand I have to go. A reminder that you are tuned into Straight Talk Africa. To participate in our discussion, please call us at 202-619-3111. US country code is 1. We'll continue our discussion in a moment, so please don't go away.
Today's youth are not just the next generation of African leaders, they are today's leaders. And this is the time to invest in them. Today, not tomorrow. So let's connect. Let's engage with each other on issues that will transform our societies. Innovation, leadership, entrepreneurship, things that you're doing to move the continent forward, to make you the greatest generation that Africa has known. It's Upfront every Wednesday, 17:30 UTC, right here on the Voice of America.
If you like today's show, please write and tell us what you think or give us some suggestions. Be sure to tell us what station you're tuned into. Our address, Straight Talk Africa, Voice of America, 330 Independence Avenue Southwest, Washington, D.C. 20237 USA. Or send us an email at africatv@voanews.com. Log on to our website at voaafrica.com. Or post your comments on Facebook. Keywords Straight Talk Africa.
Thank you very much, Esther Giziri. And of course, this is Straight Talk Africa, coming to you live from Washington. You seem to be, you looked like you wanted to weigh in, River.
I did. So I wanted to agree and disagree.
Okay, very good.
I wanted to agree with the ambassador that I see the point that in a society that's fractured and doesn't have a history of leadership, maybe you need a jump start.
Yes.
So maybe there is a way that you provide space for women to come in, but they have to demonstrate competency to stay. And so I think that's really good. I mean, I have a column and I get a lot of feedback. It's not about a woman or man, it's about the competency. So I just think as long as you recognize it's a space to open, but then you have to earn it, I'm okay with that. On the Rwanda situation, I don't know it as well as you did, but you know, my only comment is it's still that ultimate barrier in Rwanda. These women who are in parliament, they can't aspire to the presidency. You know,
Why?
Why? Well, it seems like it is a well-managed, well-governed country, but at the same time, there is not full democratic space. And the Constitution, at the request of the people in Rwanda, was changed, and that's a discussion for a completely other show.
That is true.
But I do think that ultimately, and I think we saw this in Gambia, and I want to just divert for a bit. You know, we saw in Gambia last December in a display of public voting where you actually have to go in and say, I'm with this guy, that the majority of Gambians went in and they put their marble in the box of the opposition leader, even though the sitting president said that they would be killed. And I think there's such a thirst for democracy on the continent. And I think that that thirst eventually is going to spill over into Rwanda, you know, if it hasn't already. But so that's going back to what I agree with the ambassador is I do think that you do need to jumpstart and accelerate opportunities. But once people are in the space, once women are in the space, they have to demonstrate the competency and capability to lead. And I go back to what I feel my greatest thought is in terms of doing that is empowerment at the very basis with its maternal and child health and education and access to credit and networks.
There's no question that there is a desire, I don't know whether I should call it democracy or Coca-Cola democracy, but certainly a desire for social, economic justice for all.
Opportunity.
Yeah, and when you think about the social media, the proliferation of the social media, and the changing demographics, I don't see how you can stop that. Because a lot of young people are not invested in the status quo. They are not invested there, the economy and what have you. They have no jobs. In some of the countries, you'll find that youth unemployment is, in fact, over 80%.
Yeah.
You think these guys are just going to be walking the streets and just looking the other way? Let me ask you a question about education. There is a saying that if you educate a girl, you not only at the end of the day get a woman really, but that in fact you get a community really benefiting out of that type of education. But that, on the other hand, if you educate a boy, you end up simply getting a man and an individual. You agree with that?
Yes.
Really? So how can we change that?
Why do we have to change?
Because both are just human beings.
Yeah, no, when we say educating a girl is educating a community, we are not saying at the expense of not educating a boy. Because throughout you have enjoyed that. But then, if you educate me, it's just like, I was to give the example of my mother, was not very highly educated.
Correct.
Yes. But then when they educated us, because we were majority in the family, I mean the girls were more than the boys, we had only 2 boys and 4 girls. The girls took up all the responsibilities. More, of course, if they are listening, they would not agree with me. But but the girls took up the responsibility at the family level. We had also to take care of our extended families. So that's what the community they talk about is all about. But for you, most of these men, boys, it's just about them.
It's about them.
Just because me, even if sometimes we can quarrel with my husband, he said, why are you always so generous with these people, with your dependents? I said, I mean, if I don't bring them up, then it means our whole family, our whole extended family, I'm not helping to be myself, and then the rest are so poor, they cannot go to school. So this is why I think the passion maybe we have, the compassion that we have, maybe you don't have that.
But that raises also some might say, some cultural contradictions, because in a lot of African cultures, when a girl or a woman marries, she is considered no longer to be part of that community where she's coming from. She's going somewhere else.
Yes.
And in fact, that has even been in part used as a justification, for example, for denying her land rights, access to that and what have you. And yet, here you are talking, and in fact, there is a lot of evidence to support that. In fact, it is the female that end up being more responsible to the community, including their parents and relatives and what have you.
Yeah, because I mean, if my brother marries a woman, she joins us in that family.
Correct.
And I'm going to the other family. So it is cross-fertilization.
Interesting.
It's not either or. Wherever I am, because when I talk of my family, it's my family from my maternal, but also the family of my husband's side. So it is not just about my parents, but I have my mother-in-law, I have that extended family on both sides. And we have this win-win situation. You have both on both sides.
Let me ask you a $1 billion question. If somewhere in Africa, a young girl, lady, is watching this program or is listening to you, what would be your advice to her? What does she need to do, for example, in order to stand on your shoulders so as to see a little bit further than you?
Yeah, I don't see any other way except empowering her through education. First and foremost is education. There is no shortcut. There is no shortcut other. You have to take the school seriously. And I don't know, was it you who mentioned about these early pregnancies, which has weighed very heavily on our girls in our societies. But if you are not educated, you are not empowered. But also, hard work. You know, sometimes people, they say we are sexually abused because sometimes they want favors and these shortcuts. Hard work is what will bring you to greater heights. From the school, from what you do. If you are at work, you are writing your book, I know you spend a lot of time on it, and it came out beautiful. You see? So these are the values I would want to impart to our hidden, that don't go for shortcuts. Shortcuts are not sustainable.
Very interesting. You know, there is a saying that all of life is action and passion. And to ignore the actions and passions of your time or your generation is to risk having really not lived at all. What about you? Time is not our best ally.
I agree with everything that the ambassador said. If there's a young girl, whether it's anywhere in Africa, I mean, I think it's empowerment through education. And it is that there's no shortcuts. I mean, in the social media world, Shaka, one of the dangers is people think you can, you know, find a shortcut. One day you're no one, and the next day you're everyone. But it's hard work. It's hard work. And the ambassador referred to, you know, to my book. I mean, it took me more than a decade to write the book, and only after 20 years of working with Ellen Johnson Sirleaf and 30 years on the continent did I feel like I had the right
30 seconds
to tell the story. 30 seconds, okay. So
yeah, to remain focused.
Yeah.
Yeah, to your goal.
Unfortunately, time is not our best ally. On that note, thanks to our distinguished guests, Ambassador Liberator Mulamula, visiting scholar, Institute for African Studies, George Washington University, and K. River Levinson, President and CEO, KRL International, LLC. Thanks to our affiliate stations, along with our viewers and listeners. We thank you for tuning in. For many of our Voice of America radio affiliates, Learning English is coming up next. And tomorrow morning is Daybreak Africa with James Bate. On behalf of the Voice of America, thanks for tuning in to Straight Talk Africa. And in the